of the Year. Giles, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
And I understand you're in San Francisco and you gave quite an amazing talk last night.
Yeah, I've been in San Francisco for a few days, doing a couple of talks at schools, and we had one yesterday evening as well, but it's been a great visit.
Fantastic. I'm very jealous. Some of my favorite people are there. So I would love to share with all of our viewers your story. And today, before I came to the studio, I obviously watched your TED Talk again and just listened to some of the work that you do around stories and telling people's just incredible stories around the world. But obviously, you yourself have a pretty remarkable and just very inspirational story. So do you mind telling the viewers just a little bit about your journey?
Well, it depends where you want to start that journey. I mean, for me, the journey really started when I was 18. I had a car accident. I was in hospital. Up to that point, I wanted to be an athlete. I had a sports scholarship. And suddenly, at 18, I found I couldn't pursue the career I'd always thought I would. And so lying in a hospital bed at 18, I had no idea what my future would be. By coincidence, and unfortunately, my godfather passed away at the same time. And he left me two things. One was a book by the war photographer Don McCullen, and the other was an Olympus OM10 camera. And I looked at this book and these photographs taken by Don in things like the Vietnam War, black and white images from Biafra, from Bangladesh. And I was completely taken by that. And really that's kind of when my journey began, because really my journey is all about my life with photography.
Wow, fantastic. And you know, obviously, you've had quite a journey with that, including and leading up to the accident that you had a couple of years ago. Interesting. I obviously haven't seen you since then, so I haven't had a chance to tell this story. But the evening that we got the news, I was with our mutual friend Julie, who is how I met you, and I just remember hearing, you know, that story and what had happened, and it just being numb, just even as a friend, and feeling like, oh my gosh, this is just the worst news. And I remember asking Julie how you were doing, and even in that moment, she was telling us that you were, you know, flirting with the nurses and had a really great attitude. And I'm so curious, through your journey, what you've learned and what has really helped you really create this mindset that has led you to now go on and doing just amazing things in the world.
Well, I was injured in 2011. As you're explaining, I was out on patrol with a unit of American soldiers. I was embedded as a photographer, trying to tell the story of the impact of war on this group of Americans. When we were on patrol, I stepped on an IED, losing both my legs and my arm. I mean, the worst really was actually when I returned to the UK 3 days after the accident, because the next 46 days I spent in intensive care. Nobody really thought I'd survive. My family was called in on 2 occasions to say their goodbyes. So it was an incredibly difficult time. But in many ways, it was harder for me personally after that 46 days, because after 46 days of intensive care, I was well enough to be moved into a normal ward. And that's really, for me, when the sort of acceptance of what happened had to start. You know, I was confronted by the fact that I was probably never going to walk again, that I would never work again. I was told I probably wouldn't even live independently again. So everything that I treasured, everything that I did had suddenly been taken away from me. And about 3 months after my injury, I was well enough to be put in a wheelchair for the first time. And I was taken to have a shower. And it was the first time that I actually saw myself in a full-length mirror. And I was so shocked. I was repulsed, really, by seeing myself. You know, I was missing these limbs, I had all the scars across my body. I had lost so much weight. I really didn't recognize myself and felt physically sick at seeing myself. And I went to bed that night, I cried my eyes out, and just remember thinking, I wish I hadn't survived. But it was the next morning, I don't know what happened, but I woke up and I guess my stubbornness had kicked in, and I woke up the next day thinking, you know what, this is it. This is now my life, and I have to take control of it again. And so really, at that point, I decided it was kind of make or break time. I was either going to give up and accept that my life was over, or I was going to start a new life. And so I decided not to focus on things I couldn't do, but to focus on everything that I still could do. And more than that, to actually try and find the good things that had happened from this experience. That there was no point thinking about the bad things, but somewhere in there, I believed something good would come from this.
That's absolutely amazing. I know, I mean, it's unbelievable, and I love that you had that experience and that mindset as far as believing that. It's so interesting to me. I'm a coach, and I work with people all day long, and they come with these problems that are so small, compared sometimes to this life-changing experience. And I just think it's remarkable for you to have adopted that mindset, but then to go on now and not only inspire others, but even just within the work that you do, telling other people's stories. So can you tell our viewers a little bit about what you're up to now and what kind of projects you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, for over a decade, I've been a humanitarian photographer documenting the effects of conflict on civilians and communities around the world. So that's the work that I've always done. Obviously, after being injured myself, that work took on a new importance to me. I feel I'm in quite a unique position. I go and I photograph people injured in conflict, and I've been through that same experience. So who better to tell their stories? So my work hasn't really changed from before my accident, but I think I'm even more passionate about it than I ever have been. So I kind of travel around. I worked in, I think, 15 countries last year. So mainly documenting the effects of conflict, looking at things like refugees in Lebanon, looking at the effects of the war in Sri Lanka. And that's, as I say, a continuation of the work that I've already done. In the future, I'm now looking to try and bring together all these different stories. And I'm creating a project called Legacy of War, which again is looking at post-conflict countries 10, 20, 30, 40, even more years after a conflict, and looking at the impact that war is still having. And that's stories like in Laos, where people are still being injured by unexploded ordnance that was dropped during the Vietnamese War. I'm looking in Vietnam at landmines, in Colombia where there's landmines, looking at former child soldiers in Sierra Leone, looking at the effects of PTSD in American servicemen. So really trying to bring together all these different elements to try and make people understand that the wars don't end when a peace treaty is signed. Wars continue to affect and destroy lives for decades after they end.
Very good point. And so can you share with our viewers a couple of your most inspirational stories that you've covered?
I'm inspired all the time by the people that I document. One of the great strengths I got when I was injured myself was thinking about all the people that I've photographed over the years. I don't see people as victims, and I don't like to represent people as victims. They're victims of circumstance. And actually, often in those really difficult times is when I see the incredible strength that we as humans have. And more especially, what I tend to see is the love. And people think that's strange because I'm seeing, some of the worst situations in the world. But what you do see there is the love between communities, between parents and children, between cousins, whatever it is. And that's the thing that kind of keeps me going. So within those stories, of course, there have been some in particular that have inspired me. One that springs to mind is a young boy called Atola. Atola was 7 years old when he was walking to school just a few miles away from where I was injured in Afghanistan. And it was just a couple of months after I was injured. And on his way to school that day, he stepped on a landmine and he lost an arm and a leg. Injuries very similar to my own. In 2012, when I returned to Afghanistan, I photographed him at an ICRC limb fitting center in Kabul. And I have to say, it was one of the most heartbreaking experiences of my life. I was looking through my camera, and normally the camera acts as almost like a barrier between me and the person I'm photographing. But photographing Atola that day, I was just in floods of tears because I was looking at this 7-year-old boy and I was thinking of the pain that I'm in most days, physically and mentally. And I was looking at this 7-year-old boy thinking, why should he have to go through what I go through simply because he was walking to school? And that's the kind of story that inspires me to do the work that I do. I mean, that's why I feel privileged, really, despite what's happened, to do what I do, to tell stories of people like Atola.
That is incredible. It's interesting. I didn't know, again, as we had not had a chance to connect, but I was looking briefly at your website before, and I did feel that definitely comes through. I was looking at these photos, and although it is of all these war-torn countries and these stories, I felt like there was so much love in so many of the photos. There were quite a few, women holding their children. And I think that's a really beautiful, message to show, as well as all of the, the other things that you're showing. I went to Haiti and volunteered after the earthquake, and I can definitely relate to what you're saying, because on one hand, you see the worst devastation I had ever experienced, and then on the other hand, you see these stories of triumph and beauty and love and so forth. So I'm excited to check out this book. So I understand you're also doing a project with the Invisible Children. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the project I did in Lebanon last year was called Invisible People, and it was about Syrian refugees in Lebanon. A lot of filmmakers, a lot of photographers and journalists are really interested in the things that make us all different. What makes one country different to another, what makes one particular group different from another. And I'm not really interested in that. I'm fascinated by the commonalities. And I think refugees is a really great example of that, because people hear of refugees and they say, I have nothing in common with those people. I don't understand the life of a Syrian refugee. And so what I'm trying to do with my work is to make people see the similarities and see that actually we're all the same. When I go to a refugee camp, I don't see a refugee. I see a taxi driver, a doctor, a mechanic, a teacher, a lawyer. I see people forced to become refugees. And I see the same sort of love and tenderness that I might see sitting at my sister's house with my nephews. It's these interactions. So I wanted to make a film and a photographic project that really tried to show the reality for lives of refugees in Lebanon. It's a terrible situation. There's 1.5 million refugees living in a country of only 4 million people. The infrastructure's at breaking point. People are not getting education, not getting healthcare. And these people are people that need our help. And so I was trying to just, as I say, make people relate, make people understand that their lives are really no different from ours. It's just the circumstance of those lives.
Fascinating. So how can people get involved? I know there's going to be a lot of viewers that want to learn more about you, but what's the best way if someone's watching this and they feel compelled to, either donate or get involved on a deeper level? What do you suggest that they do?
There's a lot of great nonprofits out there working in different countries. To be honest, there are so many, but at the top of my head, I think of charities like Emergency USA, which is a great charity, Handicap International, Doctors Without Borders are just a few doing great work. But really, I would say to people, just take the time, find out about a situation, try and understand. And I have this saying that, we can all be cogs in a bigger wheel of change. I think sometimes people look at a situation and they think, wow, this problem is so big. What can I do? What difference can I make? And I just believe that we actually all can make a difference. I found photography was the way I could work. Sometimes I wish I was a politician. Sometimes I wish I was a doctor and could directly help people. But I found photography was my way of making a difference. So, giving money is one way, but people can maybe write a letter to a politician about a situation. They can get more actively involved in local nonprofits, local issues. I just think the most important thing is always be aware that you can make a difference.
Such a great point. One person can really make a big difference in the world, and that's what we're here to do with this show, is really introduce people to those people that are out there making a big difference. And
but as I say, I think it's the fact that everybody can do it. It may sound like a bit of a kind of cliche thing to say, but I just think if everybody makes somebody else's life a little bit better, then what a better world we'd live in. And I set out with my photography, not because I have the solutions, but I want people to see some of the issues going on so that people can act and make a difference. And as I say, I really believe people can do that. I think we often get stuck into all situations, situations in our own life, more sort of bigger political and global situations, and we say, I can't make a difference. But in my own life, I went through an incredible change, a sudden change, and I realized that I had to control that change. I had to own it. And once I own that change, then I could move forward. So as I say, it's the same with everything in the world. We can make a difference, even in a situation that seems impossible. I lost 3 limbs. It's hard to believe that I would end up with my life being better than it was before that happened. But that was possible by believing in change.
Fantastic message. Wow, very inspiring. So what is next for you? What's on the horizon?
Well, I'm in San Francisco at the moment, but I'm heading off to Hong Kong and then to Cambodia, where I'm doing a story on landmines, and then Vietnam, and then probably Lebanon again. I mean, it's a constant kind of rolling thing for me at the moment. I live out my suitcase and yeah, just on the road all the time. But as I say, I'm grateful to do that. I was told I would never work again, so the opportunity to do it is great for me.
Fantastic. And how can viewers learn more about you specifically? If they're interested in connecting or seeing your photographs, how can they find you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can follow me on Twitter, which is obviously a great way these days to show photographs. You can go to my website, which is just gilesdooley.com, and you can see my work there. And yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways to interact. But if you go to the website, you'll see links to some of the films I've made and some of these other projects.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. We are beyond appreciative. You know, again, as I said, our whole goal with the AskBonBon Show is to introduce the viewers to the people and the tools to create a life that they love, and really to inspire others that you can make a change and you can make a big difference in the world. So we really thank you for being so courageous and sharing your story, and for all the beautiful and amazing work that you do.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been good to chat.
You're very welcome. Hope to see you soon. Take good care.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.